You know that word professional, it gets used pretty loosely these days,
Right,
right?
absolutely. Like someone shows up on time, does a decent job.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they're so professional. But when we talk about engineers or geoscientists here in Canada, professionalism is, well, it's a whole different ballgame.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's not just about being good at your job. It's a legal thing, a
A
status.
legal status, yeah, and like a serious ethical contract with society, a privilege even.
That's the core of it, that distinction we really need to nail down.
Right.
We're not just talking about, skilled trades or specialized jobs. These are professions, engineering, geoscience, like medicine or law, that have actual legal power.
Legislatively empowered, I think the source material calls it.
Exactly.
Right.
And that comes with this huge weight of public trust. Getting your head around that difference, the whole legal and ethical setup, it's fundamental,
Yeah.
especially, if you're prepping for the NPTE, the National Professional Practice Exam.
Right. That's critical background. And that's really our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? We're using the source material to unpack this, well, this complex structure, this idea of self-governance.
Mm-hmm.
We want to show why having that PE or PGO title isn't just, something for the business card. It's about this legal agreement where being accountable is everything.
And how that whole system ultimately is there to protect the public.
Safety, competence, making sure things are done right across the country.
It's the ultimate trade-off, really. Professionals get these exclusive rights, these privileges.
But they give up some autonomy, right? They have to submit to the regulator.
Precisely, to ensure public safety stays paramount.
Okay. Now, before we really dive into the weeds here, the specific acts, the codes of ethics, how discipline works, just a quick note.
Uh-huh.
If you are studying for the NPPE, or maybe you're just really curious about what underpins licensed practice in Canada.
Which is fascinating stuff, actually.
It is. Then definitely hit that subscribe button right now. We're committed to bringing you detailed content that will really help you master this material and hopefully ace that NTPE exam.
Definitely stick around.
All right, let's get into this core idea first. The difference between a profession in the specific legal sense and just, well, any other job or occupation. The sources say these professions, engineering, geoscience, law, medicine, have a distinct and privileged place. What gives them that place legally?
Well, the absolute key feature is self-regulation, or maybe self-governance is a better term.
Okay.
Most jobs, even highly skilled ones, are regulated externally, right? By government agencies, maybe industry bodies, or just your employer's rules.
Yeah.
But these specific professions, they have the legal authority and the responsibility handed to them by government legislation.
Provincial or territorial legislation.
Yes, exactly, to govern themselves through their own organizations like APEGA or PEO or engineers and geoscientists BC. They set the standards, they decide who gets in, they enforce the rules, they handle discipline. That internal power, that's the mark of this kind of profession.
Okay, but that raises the obvious question, doesn't it? Why would society, why would the government grant a group the right to police itself? I mean, isn't there a risk of them just protecting their own, the whole foxes guarding the henhouse idea?
It's a really valid question, and it cuts right to the heart of what we call the social contract.
Okay, the social contract.
Society grants this power, this privilege, because fundamentally, who else can judge professional competence in highly complex fields? Think about a sophisticated engineering design or a complex geological assessment.
Right.
If something goes wrong, a structural failure maybe, or an unforeseen environmental issue from a resource project, can a typical government inspector or a member of the public really determine if it was negligence, incompetence, or just, an unpredictable event?
Probably not. They wouldn't have the deep technical knowledge.
Exactly. So the system trusts the profession as a collective body to have that specialized knowledge to set the standards, judge the work, and maintain ethical oversight. Because really, no one else is equipped to do it effectively. The government essentially says, we don't have this specific expertise, so we delegate this regulatory power to you, the professionals.
So it's a delegation of power that leads us right into this social contract concept. If society, through the government, is giving up this regulatory power, what's the deal? What does the profession get, and what absolutely must it give back?
It's a really significant exchange. On one side, society grants two incredibly valuable things. First, the exclusive right to practice.
Meaning only licensed members can do certain kinds of work.
Yes, specific activities defined in the legislation, the ones that most directly impact public safety, health, property, the environment. It's a protected scope of practice. Second, they get the exclusive right to use specific professional titles.
Like P.A. Shea. or PGO.
Exactly. Those aren't just letters after your name. They're legally protected designations. They signal to the public that this person has met rigorous standards and is accountable to a regulatory body.
Okay, so that's what the profession gets. A legal monopoly on certain work and protected titles. Big advantages. What's the payback? What's the promise they make?
The promise is ironclad, or it's supposed to be. In return, the profession commits, legally and ethically, to regulate its members strictly and always in the public interest.
Not in the member's interest.
No, the public interest comes first. That means maintaining high and evolving standards of practice, enforcing a binding code of ethics, ensuring accountability through discipline. This is why belonging to that self-governing organization, the association or the order, isn't optional. It's not like joining a club. It's a legal requirement to practice. It's the mechanism for accountability.
That makes sense. Now, you mentioned self-governing, and it sounds very independent, but you also said the power comes from legislation. So how limited is this autonomy? They can't just make up any rules they want, can they?
No, absolutely not. And that's a critical point, especially for anyone entering the profession. Self-regulation doesn't mean total independence. It's autonomy within limits
Limits set by.
set by the law.
Yeah.
The professional associations operate directly under the authority of that provincial or territorial statute, the Regulatory Act. They are self-governing, yes, but within the legal framework created by the government. They can't exceed the powers the Act gives them.
And if they try, if they make a decision or a rule that seems unfair or goes beyond the act.
Well, their decisions, especially disciplinary ones, are subject to judicial review. The courts can step in. Plus, the government often retains some direct oversight.
How so?
Many acts require public members, people who aren't engineers or geoscientists, to sit on the governing council and on disciplinary committees.
So non-professionals are involved in governing the professionals.
Exactly. To ensure the public perspective is always there, to prevent it from becoming too insular, just focused on the profession itself. It's another check and balance, making sure that privilege of self-regulation is always being measured against the public good. Okay, so to really see how this works day to day, we need to look at those regulatory acts. The key thing to remember in Canada is that licensing is strictly provincial or territorial. There's no single national engineering or geoscience license.
Right. So even though the principles might be similar across the country, the actual rules I follow, the body I report to, depends entirely on where I'm working. If I'm licensed in Alberta with APEGA and take a job in Ontario, I need to get licensed with PEO.
Absolutely. You must be licensed in the jurisdiction where the work is happening. Every single province, every territory has its own specific act. These acts define who can practice, what the scope of practice is, and they establish the regulatory body for that jurisdiction.
The source material gives some good examples of this patchwork, right?
It does. In Alberta, you've got the Engineering and Geoscience Professions Act, which created APEGA.
And in BC, they recently brought in the Professional Governance Act, governing engineers and geoscientists BC. That was a bit of a shakeup, wasn't it?
It was, aiming for potentially stronger oversight and public protection mechanisms compared to some older models. Then you have Ontario with the Professional Engineers Act and PEO.
And Quebec is interesting, too, with the Engineers Act and the Ordre des Ingénieurs du Québec. They operate under a different legal system, civil law, and often seem to be at the forefront of accountability discussions.
They do. The point is, while the names and some details differ, the purpose and the core functions laid out in these acts are fundamentally the same across Canada.
So what are those foundational rules these acts set out? What do they actually do to structure this whole system?
Think of the acts as the constitution for the profession in that province. They're usually quite detailed, and they lay down, I'd say, 4 critical pillars for self-governance to work legally.
Okay, pillar number 1.
First, they specify who is eligible for a license. The minimum requirements usually focusing on education from an accredited program and supervised work experience.
Got it. Pillar 2.
Second, and this is crucial, they define the scope of practice. They legally reserve certain activities or types of work exclusively for licensed professionals. Things that, if done improperly, could directly harm the public or the environment.
So practicing without a license in that reserved scope is actually illegal.
Absolutely illegal.
Uh-oh.
Which brings us to pillar 3. The acts explicitly define what counts as professional misconduct, incompetence, or negligence. And they also define what constitutes illegal, unlicensed practice.
And there are serious consequences.
Yes. Fines, potentially even jail time for illegal practice, and for licensed members found guilty of misconduct or incompetence. That leads to pillar 4,
Which is?
the power of the regulatory body. The acts grant the association or order this significant legal authority to investigate complaints against members, to hold formal disciplinary hearings, and critically, to impose penalties.
What kind of penalties are we talking about?
It can range from a reprimand, maybe mandatory courses or fines, all the way up to suspending the professional's license for a period, or in the most serious cases, revoking it permanently, taking away their right to practice.
Wow, okay. That's real power. Now, you mentioned this before, but it seems vital. The acts state the association's purpose is public protection, not member promotion. But the members pay the dues that fund the association. How does the law keep that focus sharp? How do they stop it from becoming just a club protecting its own?
That's the constant tension, isn't it? And legislatures have tried to reinforce this public duty over time. The acts themselves are usually crystal clear. They often contain explicit clauses stating that if there's ever a conflict between the public interest and the interests of the profession or its members, the public interest must win out.
So it's written right into the law.
It is. And then you have those structural checks. We talked about the public members on council and committees. Their job is partly to be that voice asking, is this decision truly serving the public or just the profession? Plus, the associations usually have to report annually to the government. Sometimes their finances are reviewed. There's ongoing accountability back to the legislative body that granted the power in the first place. It's a system designed, at least on paper, to keep that public mandate front and center.
Okay, let's shift from the legal framework to the actual doing. How do these self-governing bodies, these associations, actually fulfill that public protection mandate day to day? The source material breaks it down into three main functions: admission, regulation, discipline, and standards. Let's tackle admission first, function A. This is the gateway, right?
Exactly. Admission and licensing is arguably the most important proactive function. It's the first line of defense. The association set up some pretty strict, multi-layered hurdles that everyone has to clear before they can practice.
Hurdles designed to ensure what?
Two things mainly. Technical competence, obviously, but also ethical fitness and an understanding of their professional obligations.
So what are the standard requirements across Canada? What does someone need to demonstrate to get that PE or PGO?
Generally, there are three key requirements you have to meet. First, the academic piece.
A university degree.
Yes, but typically not just any degree. For engineering, it usually has to be from a program accredited by the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board, the CEAB.
And for geoscience?
Often, it's accreditation through the Canadian Council of University Geoscience Chairs, or CCUCC, or meeting specific syllabus requirements. This national accreditation ensures a consistent, high standard of technical education no matter where you studied in Canada.
Okay, so academics first. What's second?
Practical experience. You can't just graduate and get your license. You typically need 4 more years of supervised work experience
Supervised.
by an already licensed PE, or PGO. The idea is mentorship, applying your academic knowledge to real-world problems under the guidance of someone who's already demonstrated competence and ethical practice. They have to assess your readiness.
Makes sense. Academics, experience. What's the third leg of the stool? This one seems particularly relevant for our listeners thinking about the NPPE.
It is. The third requirement is successfully passing the National Professional Practice Examination, the NPPE.
Now, this isn't a technical exam, is it? Engineers and geoscientists have already proven their technical smarts through their degree and experience. So why this extra exam on law and ethics?
Because, as we've been saying, being a professional is only partly about technical skill. The NPPE specifically tests your knowledge of the non-technical side, the laws that govern the profession, the ethics you're bound by, and the principles of professionalism itself.
So it covers things like the specific regulatory act in your province.
Exactly, and the code of ethics. Plus, foundational legal concepts relevant to practice things like contract law, tort law, which includes negligence and liability, maybe intellectual property, workplace safety. It proves you understand the legal boundaries and the ethical duties that come with the privilege of being a licensed professional.
So passing the NPPE signals, you understand the rules of the game, not just how to do the technical work.
That's a good way to put it. It confirms you understand the professional responsibility framework.
Okay, that's the gateway function A. Once someone is licensed, we move to function B, regulation and discipline. This is about ongoing oversight, right? Keeping members accountable.
Yes, this is the enforcement side. How does the association monitor, conduct, and enforce the rules? The cornerstone here is the code of ethics.
Which is binding on all members.
Absolutely binding. It outlines their fundamental duties, paramount responsibility to the public, acting with competence, integrity, honesty, fairness, all those core professional values. But the code only works if it's enforced. That's where the disciplinary processes come in. That's the legal muscle.
So walk us through that. Let's say a member of the public or even another professional files a complaint about someone's work or conduct. What typically happens?
Well, the process has to be rigorous and fair because someone's livelihood is potentially on the line, and the decisions can be challenged in court. It usually starts with some kind of initial review or investigation
Her
committee.
job is to.
Gather the facts, look at the evidence, maybe interview the person who complained, the professional involved, any witnesses. They determine if there's enough substance to proceed, if there's a potential breach of the act or the code of ethics.
And if they decide there is.
Then it typically moves to a formal disciplinary committee hearing. This often looks a bit like a court proceeding. You'll have lawyers involved, evidence presented, testimony given. Importantly, these committees usually include both fellow professionals and those public members we mentioned earlier.
To ensure an impartiality.
Exactly. And the standard of proof is usually quite high, often clear and convincing evidence. If the committee finds the professional guilty of misconduct or incompetence, they then decide on the penalty.
And we talked about the range of penalties, reprimands, fines, suspension, revocation.
Correct. And crucially for public trust, these decisions and the reasons behind them are often published. Maybe not the minor ones, but significant disciplinary actions are usually made public.
That transparency seems key. It shows the system isn't just sweeping problems under the rug.
It's essential for maintaining credibility.
Okay, that covers discipline. What about the third function, function C, setting and maintaining standards? This sounds more proactive, keeping the profession up to date.
It is. It's about ensuring the standards of practice don't become static. The regulatory bodies are constantly developing and updating things like practice guidelines, technical standards, policies on specific issues.
Like new environmental regulations or standards for using new materials.
Precisely. They have to reflect the current state of knowledge, technology, and societal expectations. But maybe the most visible part of maintaining standards for individual members is the requirement for continuing professional development CPD.
Right, CPD. We hear that acronym a lot. Is it just about ticking boxes or does it have real regulatory teeth?
Oh, it definitely has teeth. The idea behind mandatory CPD is fundamental. Technical knowledge isn't permanent. It decays, it becomes outdated.
Especially with technology changing so fast.
Exactly. If you got your license 20 or 30 years ago and haven't actively kept up with new methods, new software, new safety protocols, new environmental understanding, are you still truly competent to practice safely?
Probably not in some areas.
So, mandatory CPD requires professionals to dedicate a certain number of hours each year, specifically to learning and development activities relevant to their practice. They usually have to track it, report it, and sometimes they're audited. It reinforces that being a professional isn't a one-time achievement at graduation. It's a continuing commitment to maintaining competence throughout your entire career. You know, all this talk about legal structures, acts, discipline, standards, it's all incredibly important, but we have to keep coming back to the ethical foundation. This whole system of self-governance, this privilege, it's built entirely on trust.
Trust that the profession will police itself effectively.
Yes. Trust that it demonstrates collectively what you might call moral maturity, integrity, that it will prioritize public safety over protecting its own members.
I want to push on that idea of collective responsibility again. Okay, one engineer acts unethically or incompetently. That's bad for them, obviously. But how does that individual failure realistically threaten the whole profession's privilege of self-governance?
Because the damage isn't contained. Think about a major high-profile failure, a bridge collapse that should have been preventable, a tailings dam failure with huge environmental consequences, a building evacuation due to serious design flaws.
Okay.
These events don't just reflect badly on the individuals involved, they immediately cast doubt on the entire profession and its regulatory system. The public asks, how could this happen? Wasn't there oversight? Did the association know and do nothing? Is the disciplinary process too weak?
So it erodes public confidence across the board.
Massively. And if that confidence erodes too much, if there are repeated failures or a sense that the profession isn't taking its responsibilities seriously, then the government faces immense pressure to step in.
And potentially take back that delegated authority.
Exactly. Revoke or severely curtail the privilege of self-regulation and impose direct government control. It has happened or been threatened in various jurisdictions around the world, and even within Canada, there's constant scrutiny. So every member's actions reflect on the whole.
That really underlines the stakes. So let's clearly define this public interest mandate. We know it's the primary duty stated in the acts. What does it actually encompass? Is it just about preventing bridges from falling down?
That's definitely a huge part of it, the physical safety aspect, protecting life, health, property, and increasingly emphasize the environment. That's paramount.
But it's broader than just physical safety.
Yes. It also includes things like ensuring honesty and transparency in professional dealings, maintaining competence, acting with integrity and fairness, making sure the public gets the quality of service and the reliable advice they have a right to expect when they engage a professional engineer or geoscientist. It's the ethical compass for all professional conduct.
Okay, now for perhaps the toughest ethical scenario, conflict of duty. A professional engineer works for a company. They owe duties to their employer. They might have a contract with a client, owing duties there too. But the code of ethics says their highest duty is to the public. What happens when those duties clash?
This is where the rubber really hits the road ethically. The code of ethics in every jurisdiction establishes a clear, non-negotiable hierarchy.
And at the top is.
The duty to the public interest. It must always take precedence over any duty owed to an employer, a client, colleagues, or even your own personal interests if there's a conflict.
Always. No exceptions.
No exceptions.
Yeah.
So take your example. An employer pressures an engineer to cut corners on safety standards to save money. Or a client asks a geoscientist to downplay environmental risks in a report to get a project approved faster.
What's the professional obligated to do by the code?
Their duty is clear. They must refuse to compromise standards that protect the public. They might need to advise their employer or client about the ethical and legal requirements, refuse the instruction, and if the situation poses a genuine risk, they likely have a duty to report the situation.
Report it to who? The association.
Yes, potentially to the regulatory body, especially if public safety is genuinely at risk or if serious misconduct is occurring.
But that puts the individual professional in a really tough spot, doesn't it? They could lose their job, face retaliation. How does the system support them when they act as that guardian of public trust, potentially at great personal cost?
It's incredibly difficult, no question. The main support comes from the legal and ethical framework itself. By upholding the code and the act, they are fulfilling their legal duty. The regulatory body is there to back up the code. Also, many regulatory acts include provisions offering some protection, sometimes called whistleblower protection, or statutory immunity for professionals who report concerns in good faith based on their public duty.
So the law tries to shield them somewhat.
It tries to. It recognizes that the entire system of self-regulation relies on individuals having the courage to uphold standards, even when it's difficult. That individual duty to report, to speak up about unsafe or unethical practices is absolutely fundamental to making the collective responsibility work.
Okay, to really grasp what makes this professional model unique, it helps to compare it. Let's contrast engineers and geoscientists with other skilled occupations that don't have self-governance. Say, a highly skilled tradesperson like an electrician or a certified engineering technologist. What's the key difference in how they're regulated?
The fundamental difference boils down to who holds the regulatory authority and where the ultimate responsibility lies.
Okay.
Technologists, technicians, tradespeople, they're often highly skilled, require certification, follow codes, but their regulation is typically external. It might be a government ministry, a provincial apprenticeship board, maybe a separate certification body. They follow rules set for them.
Whereas professionals?
Professionals, under self-governance, have the legal power delegated to them through their association to set their own standards within the Act, judge their own peers' competence and ethics, and enforce discipline internally. Subject, of course, to that government oversight and judicial review we discussed.
So it's about that internal authority and the collective responsibility that comes with it.
Exactly. The PEGI, or PGO, carries not just individual responsibility for their own work, but a share of the collective responsibility for the integrity and competence of the entire profession in that jurisdiction. That gives them prestige, yes, but it also subjects them to a unique layer of accountability through their association, beyond just their employer or client.
If an electrician makes a mistake, they might face consequences from their employer or a government inspector. If an engineer makes a similar mistake,
they face those consequences, plus potential investigation and discipline by their professional association, which could impact their very license to practice. The legal and professional liability often runs deeper.
Got it. So, given this complex system, what are the main benefits? Why does society choose this model? What does the public get out of it?
Well, ideally, society gets a higher degree of safety and reliability because entry standards are rigorously controlled nationally. education, experience, ethics exam, and there's a mandatory system for investigating complaints and disciplining incompetence or misconduct. The public theoretically has a higher assurance of quality.
And accountability.
Yes, clear accountability. If something goes wrong due to professional failure, there's a specific body legally mandated to investigate and act. And the transparency aspect, publishing disciplinary actions, helps build and maintain public trust that the system actually works.
Okay, that's the benefit to society. What about for the professionals themselves? I mean, it sounds like a lot of responsibility and oversight. What's in it for them?
There are significant benefits. First, the professional designation PEO is a powerful marker of identity. It signals a high level of competence and ethical commitment that's legally recognized. That carries weight.
And mobility. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes, national agreements between the provincial and territorial associations make it much easier for a licensed professional to work across Canada. If you're licensed in good standing in one province, registering in another is usually streamlined. That's huge for individuals and for the national economy.
Any other benefits?
Well, the association itself provides resources, practice guidelines, seminars, networking opportunities, support, a community of peers. And the framework of CPD, while mandatory, does push professionals towards lifelong learning and staying current, which ultimately benefits their careers too.
Okay, but let's do a reality check. Self-governance sounds good in theory, but it's not without its critics or challenges. These regulatory bodies are under scrutiny all the time, aren't they?
Constantly.
Oh, yeah.
And that scrutiny is healthy, arguably necessary. The core challenge always comes back to that potential conflict, being funded by members while mandated to protect the public.
So what are the main areas where things get sticky, where public confidence tends to wear thin?
Well, the source material points to three main areas of concern. First is the disciplinary process itself. Sometimes it's perceived as being too slow, taking years to resolve complaints. Or the penalties handed out might seem too lenient compared to the harm caused. Or maybe too much of it happens behind closed doors.
So transparency and timeliness are key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Second, there's that recurring perception, fair or not, that the association is sometimes acting more like a guild, protecting its members' interests, rather than prioritizing the public, especially when powerful corporate interests or employers are involved. Balancing those duties is incredibly hard.
And the third area.
High-profile failures. We talked about this. When a major disaster or incident happens that involves engineering or geoscience failures, it inevitably leads to questions about whether the regulatory system was effective. Did the association miss warning signs? Was the oversight adequate?
So the takeaway is that these associations have to constantly work to demonstrate their value.
Exactly. They have to continuously prove through their actions, transparent discipline, rigorous standards, proactive communication, that self-regulation genuinely serves the public interest better than the alternatives. Because that privilege can always be questioned and potentially revoked.
We've hammered home that licensing is provincial or territorial, but then we hear about national bodies like Engineers Canada and Geoscientists Canada. If they don't actually issue licenses, what exactly is their role in this whole picture?
Think of them as facilitators and coordinators at the national level. They're umbrella organizations. Their members aren't individual engineers or geoscientists, but rather the provincial and territorial regulatory bodies themselves. APIA, PEO, Engineers and Geoscientists, BC, the Order in Quebec, and so on.
Okay, so they represent the regulators nationally. What do they coordinate?
Several key things. They work to promote consistency in standards across the country. They represent the professions internationally. They play a huge role in accrediting university programs. And they facilitate that national mobility we discussed.
Let's unpack the accreditation part. How does that work if the provinces control licensing? How do Engineers Canada or Geoscientists Canada influence education standards?
They do it indirectly but very effectively. Engineers Canada runs the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board, CEAB. Geoscientists Canada works with the Canadian Council of University Geoscience Chairs, CCUCC, and others on accreditation benchmarks.
And these boards?
These boards set the detailed criteria for what constitutes an acceptable engineering or geoscience university program in Canada. They visit universities, review curricula, faculty, resources, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, but how does that link to provincial licensing?
The provincial territorial regulators, in their acts or regulations, typically state that one of the requirements for licensure is a degree from a CEB-accredited engineering program, or meeting equivalent standards for international graduates, or a geoscience degree that meets their specific requirements, often aligned with national guidelines.
Ah, I see. So the provinces delegate the task of evaluating academic programs to these national boards.
Essentially, yes. It ensures that educational standards are consistent and high across the country, regardless of which university you attend. It saves each province from having to evaluate every single program themselves. It's a very efficient system for maintaining quality control nationally.
And what about mobility? How do they help someone licensed in, say, Manitoba get licensed more easily in Nova Scotia?
They negotiate and maintain interprovincial agreements, sometimes called mutual recognition agreements or similar. These agreements lay out the conditions under which a professional licensed in good standing in one Canadian jurisdiction can become licensed in another, usually through a much simpler and faster process than applying as a brand new applicant.
So they smooth the path for working across the country.
Exactly. It recognizes the underlying equivalence of standards thanks to things like CEAB accreditation and the NPPE, and supports a more unified national profession, which is vital for large projects and Canada's economy overall.
So they provide the national glue, essentially, holding together the provincially regulated pieces.
That's a great way to put it. They don't regulate individuals, but they ensure the system functions cohesively across provincial boundaries, maintaining standards and facilitating movement, all while respecting that ultimate licensing authority rests with the provinces and territories as per the Constitution. Hashtag tag outro.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive. I think what really comes through is that being a professional in Canadian engineering and geoscience isn't just a job title you earn once.
No, absolutely not. It's this ongoing commitment defined by a really intricate legal and ethical contract with society.
And that privilege we talked about, the right to self-govern, it's completely dependent on continuously upholding those high standards and on every single professional really living up to that commitment to the public good.
We've walked through how the laws, the regulatory acts, provide the power, how the associations use licensing, discipline, and standard setting to meet their mandate.
And how that code of ethics puts the public interest firmly at the top above everything else client, employer, self.
Every PE, every PGO has to see themselves not just as a technical expert, but as you said earlier, as a guardian of public trust. That's the core identity.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We talked quite a bit about continuing professional development, CPD, and how crucial it is for maintaining competence.
Because knowledge gets outdated.
Right. So think about the speed. Everything's changing now. AI in design, new sustainable materials, climate change impacts on infrastructure and resources, complex data analysis. If being a professional is truly this continuing commitment, how do you, as an individual, make sure your knowledge doesn't just keep up, but actually stays ahead of the curve?
What's the next thing you need to learn?
Exactly. What's the next technical skill, the next ethical consideration, the next regulatory change you need to master to remain a truly effective guardian of public trust in this incredibly complex, fast-moving world? Making that conscious choice to keep learning, keep evolving, that's really what defines your ongoing fitness to hold that professional title.
A really important point to reflect on. That was quite a detailed look at professional accountability.
It certainly was. And if you found this discussion helpful, maybe for your NPPE prep, maybe just for understanding the professional landscape, please do subscribe. We'll be bringing you more detailed insights into the legal, ethical, and practical requirements you need to grasp to be successful on the NPPE exam and in your career.
Thanks for tuning in.